I'm Maya, a now graduated, 24-year-old who majored in media studies with a minor in sociology. For our capstone senior thesis, we had to do a collaborative project, a documentary plus written paper plus public defense. The project required months of planning, shooting, editing, coding. We had an interactive website component and then a public screening/defense before faculty and community members. My group had 5 people: me, Ray, 23F, editor and close friend; Sam, 24M, sound and production lead; Priya, 24F, research and transcription; and Evan, 23M. On paper, the team had all bases covered: creative, production, research, and technical. We were all students, most of us had jobs or internships, but we were committed. For context about Evan, at first he seemed fine. He was charismatic, loud in a way that drew attention, and had a knack for dramatics. He also had a history of being the group center, the kid who'd deliver a speech, meme up a pitch, or charm faculty into liking him. That charm matters in a lot of campus settings. The problem was that, below the charm, he had a pattern. He preferred spectacle to work. He wanted credit without the boring parts, and when he felt threatened by anyone doing something better than him, he escalated into sabotage. Nobody in my group fully realized how bad it could get until the project was already late. We started in September. AITA was a documentary about the off-campus student housing market and the invisible labor students due to keep these apartments livable, unpaid repairs, subletting scams, landlord harassment. We liked it because it combined interviews, observational footage, and an interactive map. We made a division of labor. Priya and I handled research and outreach. Ray and Sam handled editing and post. Evan said he would do community outreach, on-camera hosting, and coordinate the interactive map with a developer friend he knew. In October, the first red flags appeared. Evan would volunteer to do something, like call a complicated landlord or set up a filmed interview, then flake. When asked to provide a status update, he'd respond with flustered charm, "I'm on it, team, trust me," and then post a flashy image on Instagram of him in the field, which conveniently had nothing to do with our project. His posts were always about his hustle, always worded to make him the hero of a story he wasn't actually producing. We should have kicked him out early. We didn't. Senior projects are short-staffed, and we were optimistic. We thought once he saw the schedule, he'd show up. Plus, he was convincing to faculty. He volunteered to handle on-camera interviews with long, smooth emails that soothed our anxiety. He promised to recruit 2 more interview subjects and to submit his footage by mid-November. That mid-November deadline came and went. He had technical issues, then family stuff, then an internship conflict, then clarity on the angle. Meanwhile, Priya and I were scraping together interviews. Ray was finding stock footage and making rough edits, and Sam stayed up nights mixing audio from interviews we'd shot earlier. By December, it was obvious we'd have to cover for him. The interactive map, which Evan had promised to build, never materialized. We scrambled and got a different student from the comp sci department to help late night during finals week. The map was a skeleton, and some interviews were low quality because we couldn't reshoot. But we got a passable first cut in January. 2 weeks before our defense, the high-stakes presentation to faculty, we were putting the finishing touches on the documentary and the defense slideshow. I got a panic text from Ray at 8 p.m. "Maya, Evan just uploaded a different final edit to the shared drive. He says it's the definitive director's cut and that we should use it." I opened the file. It was not our film. He had re-edited our footage, cut out long swathes of content that were the backbone of our argument, interviews with tenants who told difficult, nuanced stories, and replaced them with flashy montage sequences starring him walking in rain, him dramatically slamming a tape roll on a table, him smiling at the camera as if he had discovered the whole story. He'd also added a fake, exclusive interview clip that had been edited to make an interviewee say something they hadn't said, a cut and paste to create sound bites that fit his narrative. He'd also put his name in the credits in big letters and removed mention of key contributors. This was not just ego. This was sabotage. Our film's thesis relied on the tenants' voices being front and center. Evan turned it into an Evan show. We confronted him in our group chat, and he gaslit us. You're all way too precious. This is actually a stronger edit. You're welcome. Also, the faculty asked me to streamline it for time. It's more compelling. He refused to revert to our version, and he threatened to present his version if we tried to override him. We were livid. 2 weeks from defense, what can you salvage if a group member goes rogue? We talked to our faculty advisor. He asked for both versions, looked uncomfortable, and then said, "We can't have fabricated quotes in any academic project. If that happened, it's grounds for academic misconduct." He recommended we document everything and try to get Evan to revert the file. He also told us the department could mediate. Once Evan realized using faculty was risky, his tone changed. He backed off publicly and made a show of apologizing in the group chat, but his edits remained. In private, he dug in. He claimed artistic license and said we were stifling him. I remember him saying, verbatim, "If you guys want me to be the one to get this film seen somewhere, stop being controlling. I'm the one who can make this viral." It felt like blackmail dressed as performance. We were losing sleep. It felt like our months of work were being co-opted. We were depending on faculty to help, but the calendar wouldn't bend. The defense had to happen on a specific day because it was scheduled in the department's showcase. We reached out to other students for advice. Some suggested letting him present his version and then explaining the edits. That felt like a lose-lose, graded on our work, subject to accusations of disunity. I am not a confrontational person, but I also have a threshold where injustice becomes a fuel. The more we tried to talk to Evan, the more he performed being wounded and heroic. He'd make a dramatic line like, "I refuse to hand in something safe," and then go live on Instagram to tell people he was challenging the system. It was maddening. The rest of the group was at the end of its rope. Ray made a plan to call his mom. We had her number from coordinating a charity event months earlier and ask her to talk to him, like a parent perspective. Sam, who was usually the calm one, suggested we set up the comp sci guy to code a backup and to prepare to run with our original cut during the defense no matter what. Priya advocated for a more surgical approach, expose the fabrication calmly, and show both versions to faculty in private. I chose to be surgical and theatrical at the same time. I wanted to expose his behavior publicly because part of what he used was spectacle and PR. He loved the crowd. I wanted to use his love of performance against him so there could be no he said, she said. But I also wanted the project to survive and for the group's months of work to be recognized. So I concocted a plan. I will be blunt, it was manipulative. I figured out the exact dynamics Evan thrived on: an audience, a chance to perform, and control. The defense would be in the department screening room with faculty, students, and some community members. The plan had 3 parts. 1. Secure both cuts and backups. Make sure a correct version could play no matter what. Sam and I worked with the comp sci student to make sure the original cut would be available on a separate drive and that we could play it from someone's laptop. We also printed a digital manifest of our footage with metadata, timestamps, camera IDs, which would prove which files were original. 2. Create a staged technical glitch that forced a live comparison. This was the theatrical part. I suggested to Ray that during the defense we say the following. We would present the project as a study in students' mediated narratives, and then, midway, we would demonstrate how editing alters meaning by showing 2 versions of the same sequence side by side. The pitch sounded academic and defensible, and it was. If Evan objected, we would appeal to the advisor and say we were using the defense as an opportunity to show editing impact. That would give us cover to force a direct comparison between our version and Evan's. 3. Public illumination and invitation to accountability. While the comparison would expose his manipulations, I wanted to avoid pure humiliation. I planned to give Evan a chance to speak after the comparison, to explain his artistic choices, but also to let faculty weigh in on ethical boundaries. After the defense, if the department recommended remediation, e.g., making a public acknowledgement or doing an ethics module, I would help Evan with those steps so he could rebuild trust. I'd do that not because I liked him, but because I believed punitive measures alone wouldn't teach him to fix his pattern. The plan required coordination and secrecy. We didn't want Evan to sabotage the backup or preempt the comparison. I also worried about being petty. A part of me felt like I was orchestrating a trap. But the alternative was letting him manipulate the outcome. We rehearsed. We rehearsed what we'd say and how we'd cue the screen. Ray and I wrote a short segment that framed the switch as an academic exercise. We want to demonstrate how editorial choices alter narrative voice and power dynamics. For this, we will play 2 different edits of the same interview sequence. That phrasing made it sound legitimate. On the day of the defense, we were all tense. Evan arrived with his usual bravado. He wore a leather jacket and talked loudly. He'd posted that he was bringing the final cut and had tagged a few campus accounts. Our department screening room filled with a decent crowd of faculty, grad students, and friends. The advisor gave the usual introductions. We presented the research setup and the early methods. We discussed how we recruited participants, how we handled consent, and the ethical frameworks. Then we transitioned to the demonstration. I felt my palms sweat as I said the words. We cued the defense laptop to play our original cut of a key interview where a tenant explained a landlord's harassment. It was powerful. The interviewee's voice was clear and unedited. It highlighted the powerlessness tenants felt and was visceral. The room was silent. Then we paused it and played Evan's version of the same sequence. His version cut the interview with a montage of him pacing and interstitial shots of the building with black and white filters. He had clipped sentences to create a more sensational claim from the interviewee and had inserted his own voiceover that framed the tenant as comic relief for his journey. The contrast was stark. Faculty faces shifted from curiosity to concern. Someone whispered, edited, and another muttered, "That's not the same." Evan immediately stood up. He started to defend himself, voice pitched high. He said that we were taking away the artistic frame, that he had permission to do a director's cut, and that the demonstration was a cheap gotcha. He tried to grab the mic, to command the room. The advisor cut him off and asked him to sit and explain calmly. The department chair, who had been watching, asked to see the raw footage. Sam, Ray, and I pulled up our manifest and the raw camera files on the backup drive. The metadata showed the original timestamps and cameras, and the files matched our version. The fabricated soundbite Evan had used, when played back as raw audio, had a pause and a different phrase. The edit that made it sound like a quote in Evan's cut didn't exist in the raw file. At that point, the room shifted. The chair said, "This is serious. Misrepresenting a subject in a documentary is a violation of our standards." Evan tried to pivot to intent and to argue artistic license, but the facts were facts. He was visibly rattled. People looked at him differently, not angry yet, but wary. The department took the issue seriously. The chair postponed our evaluation while they convened a small ethics committee. We were told the committee would decide if there had been academic misconduct and what penalties, if any, would be applied. We were also advised to submit a written statement, which Ray did, calmly documenting timelines and comments. Evan submitted a flustered statement half-signed, half-typed. I confess, seeing him exposed in that way brought a rush that was hard to describe. He had weaponized charm for months, and it felt like we had him on paper. But I also felt uneasy, not because I felt bad for him, but because I wanted the outcome to be fair. We were not trying to destroy him. We wanted our work respected and an unethical edit corrected. The committee, after a week of deliberation, concluded that Evan had indeed fabricated an interview clip by juxtaposing audio and video in a way that misrepresented the interviewee. They found that while his actions had not been maliciously intended to harm the subject, they violated academic standards. His sanctions were a formal reprimand, mandatory completion of an ethics seminar for documentary practice, and a requirement to publicly acknowledge the error in any future screenings. The committee also recommended that our group be given the option to present our original cut as the official project and that any credit be allocated per contribution. We got the option to present our original cut. Evan was still allowed to attend, but with limitations. Here's where I'll probably make some people on Reddit groan. After the committee's decision and the public exposure, I did not gloat. I did something purposeful and deliberate. I reached out to Evan privately and asked him to meet me for coffee. Ray thought I was being naive. Sam said, "Don't feed him." Priya wanted nothing to do with him. But I went. At coffee, he looked thinner, a little shell-shocked. He tried to smile. It was brittle. He said that the attention had been addictive, that he'd always felt invisible unless he was the loudest voice in the room. He said a lot of things that sounded like excuses. I listened. Then I said something I hadn't felt like saying earlier. You hurt people. You risked the integrity of the interviewees. You put the rest of us in a terrible place. You need to make this right. He nodded, and then, this part surprised me, he agreed. He didn't argue. He said he wanted to fix it and asked what he could do. I gave him a few practical things: write a public statement acknowledging the edits and apologizing to the interviewee, which we would facilitate contacting, complete the ethics seminar and share what he learned with our department, and help create a small outreach screening, where our original cut could be presented to the community with correct context. I also told him that part of making it right was listening. He needed to sit down with us and hear how his behavior affected the team. Evan did all that. He wrote the statement and sent it to the interviewee with an apology and an explanation. He completed the ethics course and wrote a reflective piece about editing choices and consent. He coasted through the public humiliation with some grace and also clearly some pain. He helped us set up the outreach screening, and he showed up and introduced the screening by acknowledging his mistakes in front of the community. He didn't make excuses. He spoke about wanting to learn from this. The interviewee accepted the apology graciously, saying they appreciated the correction and that their voice mattered. For me, that was one of the most healing moments. Someone who had been misrepresented had their dignity restored. We presented our original cut for the department evaluation. The faculty recognized the depth of our research, our ethical stance, and our handling of the situation. Our final grade was high, and credit allocation was adjusted. Evans still received some credit for on-camera hosting and some fieldwork he actually did, but not for editorial or research work he hadn't performed. That was fair. The group preserved the integrity of our project and got recognition for months of work. Evan's path after graduation wasn't immediate gold. The public reprimand followed him a bit. He had to be more humble in the job market. But the experience changed him. In our conversations over the following year, he continued to express regret and to take active steps to stay accountable. He did pro bono work for a small nonprofit and, I'm told, eventually took a junior production job where he was supervised closely and learned ethics on the job. I didn't oversee that. It's what I heard from mutual acquaintances and faculty. I won't sugarcoat it. His reputation took a hit, and that was unavoidable. But what I saw, in the long run, was a person who began to move from performative gestures to actual labor. Some people will call me naive for giving him a chance after everything. Some will call me manipulative for orchestrating the trap. Both are true to an extent. The reason I engaged with him afterward was philosophical. I believe that shame without repair is cruelty. If you break something, you should be asked to help fix it. That's not leniency, it's accountability with a path to repair. I wanted Evan to do things that had tangible weight, not just public groveling on Instagram. I also wanted to model a different kind of leadership for the rest of the team. It would have been easy to revel in his fall, to gloat and walk away. But that would have left a scar on our own integrity. Helping him rebuild didn't mean we excused the harm. It meant we insisted on corrective action that benefited the community. Was my plan revenge? Yes. Was it mean? Maybe. Did it humiliate him publicly? Yes, but the humiliation followed from his choices. He chose to manipulate footage and misrepresent an interviewee. He chose to be the show. Public exposure was a logical consequence when academic ethics were at stake. I don't believe revenge needs to be cruel or destructive without purpose. My revenge was exposure with an enforced path to repair, where I think I might be the asshole. I had to set a trap. Some will say that manipulating an environment to expose someone is unethical. I understand that. If I'd lied or fabricated anything to make him look bad, we'd be in a different moral territory. I didn't lie. I used a legitimate academic demonstration as cover, which I admit was cunning. I intentionally staged the comparison in a public setting where he would be shamed. I accepted that outcome. Some will say I should have handled it privately first. We did try to handle it privately repeatedly. He didn't revert the file. He kept gaslighting us. At some point, public exposure was the only move that would prevent the re-edit from being considered the group's final project. I may have enjoyed the spectacle more than I'd like to admit. Seeing him deflated was satisfying in a human, petty way. That's not a moral badge. Why I don't think I'm the asshole. Our project involved real people whose voices were misrepresented. That's a serious ethical breach. Letting that continue is not an option. We exhausted private channels. We repeatedly asked him to revert and to discuss. Faculty mediation offered limited reprieve given the calendar constraints. The plan prioritized restoring the truth about interviewee testimony and protecting academic integrity. A year later, we're all in different cities. Ray edits podcasts. Sam does sound for an indie company. Priya works in nonprofit research. I work in community media. Evan applied to jobs and had to work through his disciplinary record. He paid his dues by doing supervised projects and took training seriously. We occasionally see him at alumni events. He's quieter and tends to listen more. I still don't love him, but I don't despise him. I think the combination of being held accountable publicly and having a path to make amends worked, painfully, but it worked. So, ATA? Did I do the right thing by staging a public comparison to expose a team member who was misrepresenting interviewees and us, even though that meant a public humiliation, and then offering him a path to accountability and repair after the fact? I'm open to being told I could have done better. If I am the asshole, tell me why. If you think the exposure was justified, tell me that too. I want to learn how to be just without being cruel.